This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Dr. Mala. This is the first time we're talking to you, and this is the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. I want to welcome you to the podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm so great. Thank you so much for having me.
I want to let people know that we do have your URL below there as www.drmala.net. That will be fully clickable if anybody wants to check that out when we're published. Right now, like I said, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. That will be clickable on all the platforms where you can listen to us or watch this podcast. And I always ask any guest that's on the show a couple questions before we really start. The two questions are: what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Oh, great questions. Yeah. What motivates me? I'm passionate about accessibility to care, about taking care of people, and certainly enhancing life. So that motivates me all around, not just for myself, but for the people that I work with and for, the different groups that I work with.
That's
Um,
that's an important thing.
yeah, yeah.
So this is like the topic I had for us today was inclusive healing, tailoring therapy for diverse communities. And it seems like sometimes people don't want to, you know, acknowledge accessibility issues.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is a big advocate for
Mm-hmm.
accessibility. She has some issues in her life, like physical and from like mental health issues that make it hard for artists. So she created an artist collective that
Mm,
deals with people with all types of disabilities and makes sure that art is accessible to
that's
those with
wonderful.
disabilities and creating like virtual spaces for artists that
Yeah.
might have these issues. And she's run into people who they're like, oh, we want to do in person only. And it's like, no, this is for diverse communities that might not be able to get into the gallery. And then
Mm-hmm.
they still don't seem to get it. They were like, well, if there's a lot of value in person. Well, then there's like you're invalidating people who can't go in person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it
Yeah.
seems to be this disconnect in what's you know the ableist type of behavior. But we'll
Sure.
get into it. But your story is that you're into like inclusive healing and supporting these diverse communities. Maybe you want to talk about how you came about doing this.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, of course, psychologist by profession, but very quickly, walked into the field of TBI, traumatic brain injury, and, really interesting just as a young therapist, walking in and seeing a group of people that are quite often misunderstood, as many are. And really just feeling that pull and passion for wanting to be able to support them in any way possible. So there's the group of people, that you walk into when you walk into this field as, you visibly see the injury. And then
Mhm.
there's the group of people where you don't. And I think that's something that really is the underlined, bolded, italicized point there is most of our journeys really are including situations and symptoms and conditions that are unseen. And
Yeah.
as a result, right, there's assumptions that end up happening. So, very quickly, I realized I wanted to be able to create that accessibility for care for those who are undergoing unseen and seen issues and conditions and symptoms.
Do you find that there's even in the field, are there biases for one condition over the other? Is like the
Oh,
things that are more readily apparent?
yeah.
Is
I mean,
that people choose to work with that more than the things that are not as apparent?
so I think when I first started off, which was over 20 years ago now, the industry was a lot different. But now I'm so thankful that, you know, we as a society, have grown in so many ways. And I think COVID did um, really help with that to a degree in terms of accessibility as well. Accessibility. Um, so I think there has been stigmas in the past. Do I think that the stigmas still exist? Absolutely. Are there inclinations? Like certain people are more inclined to working with those who have more apparent situations and conditions? Perhaps, potentially for sure, because sometimes when you're working with the more apparent, it's easier to feel successful with positive outcomes,
Mhm.
um, versus those that are unseen or maybe require a little bit more digging or a little bit more work and time as a result may feel harder to get to those outcomes and those goals that you're looking for. In my mind, though, like, first of all, everyone needs care. Everyone has, again, a recovery journey that they're on. And I am ready to meet them wherever they are.
Is time really a big, impetus? Because I know, like, in the industry, I've talked to some doctors about, like, in terms of, like, profit structure and, you got these corporations running things, and they wanna see metrics showing
Mhm.
success. So if something
Mhm.
takes longer and you've got some CFO looking for the monthly result, the weekly result, and something takes longer than that, is that
Yeah.
end up causing, like, an economic bias for that type
Oh,
of
sure.
care?
Yeah, I've been in the situations for sure. I mean, it's funny that you bring that up because we call them bean counters. Like I've been in the situation where, you know, the therapy was like, just it doesn't matter about you, don't matter, you don't count, but you need to push out the numbers, right? So I was actually at a point where I was seeing at least 10 to 15 clients in a day, and that's not what we recommend when we
Not the
train our
optimum for
students,
what
you
you're
know what I
trying to
mean?
do, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, is that really gonna make you
yeah,
productive? Are you gonna be as
exactly.
effective,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, exactly. But I will say, even in that situation and in those conditions, it with that in and of itself was formative to the program development that I'm so passionate about as well, so that we can create programs that not only will make the bean counters feel comfortable and okay, but also provide legitimate and efficacious care.
So they're willing to listen to the doctors giving them the actual, because the thing I have about, I'm in software and I work with actuaries, which are the
Mhm,
same
mhm,
kind of bean counters,
mhm,
and they're
mhm.
looking for immediate results, and I'm like, "Do you want this to work, or do
Right.
you just wanna say that we hit a deadline?" Because I'm a
Exactly.
software designer. So if you want it to work,
Yeah.
right, it's gonna take this much time. If you wanna say
Mhm.
it's ready and it's full of bugs,
Yeah.
just, what do you want? Can
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
make those arguments and make them understand, like, I can't actually solve this issue in your management by deadline structures?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, I've had both, situations where the response has been from management, like, "Absolutely not, you need to focus on just the numbers." And I've had the situation where it's been, "Sure, we love it, but bring in the numbers while you develop that and make that happen."
So you still want the numbers. Yeah, they're
Right,
numbers people. That's what they're
and
motivated by.
sure, sure, and then you sit back and you go, "Wait a second, did I just double my workload by saying that and wanting that?" But, in the end, I've always found that it's worth it. Like, I really have always appreciated being able to have the opportunity to enhance programming so that it is, like I said, efficacious for the person receiving it. Yeah.
Now you worked a lot with military personnel, I guess, coming back from traumatic injuries from,
Mhm.
out in the field. And
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so, the that kind of situation, with, like, the policies are creating these
Oh, yeah.
these victims based on, you know, the military does something and it gives you a lot of head trauma victims or people who
Yeah.
are, yeah, it's like, was that a good societal use of these people? You know,
Mhm.
why were they put in this situation to satisfy that? But that's probably beyond what you focus on. You're trying to solve their problem. there.
Well,
Yeah.
sure, sure. I mean, like, in the capacity with the military is such a beautiful community to work with, military family members of military, veterans, like, I love working with those populations because not unlike, I would say, other providers, which is another group of people that I love working with is fellow providers, and physicians and, healthcare workers and such. The demand is always returning to duty, being able to perform, right? So whatever services you are receiving, right? Whether again, you're a military member or a healthcare professional, provider, et cetera, the goal is always to be able to get back to be able to provide that service. So a lot of the programming and program development that had to happen was to facilitate that in mind. That was the big goal. How do you get the individual back to duty, right? Back to functionality to duty. Unfortunately, like throughout the ages, military or not, the mindset has always been put a band-aid on it and then send them right back out. So if you have pain, take Motrin, drink water, go back on the field, that kind of a thing. The goal for me in those situations has always been, I get that you want to get back out on the field because that's a, measurement of success in so many ways. But if you don't connect with yourself and if you don't take the time and due diligence, then you're not going to be able to do that at all. You're going to crash and crumble at some point. So, the focus has always been little nuggets of care, little, like modules of care that can be easily consumable and applicable and accessible again throughout one's day, throughout one's life, so that you feel like you're still able to maintain, some goal sets while you're healing, and certainly if treatment planning, and all recommendations point to the need for you taking a break, to advocate for that break as well. So really advocating for, especially in the military setting, all of my active duty members and their families, of course, to be able to take the time and know that that's okay, because that in essence is going to help them return to duty in a better way, in a stronger way.
Yeah, it's like the Band-Aid approach,
Mhm.
because like if you just throw a Band-Aid on something, it's a wound, it could get infected,
Yeah.
it's gonna
Oh,
fester,
yeah.
it's gonna hide low, if
Sure.
if people don't see it, like the physical wound. The physical wounds,
Mhm.
they can understand it got infected, they can understand you break your
Right.
bones, you need enough time for those bones to come back
Mhm.
for you
Mhm.
to be able to do it. But,
Mhm.
like, what's the measurement when it's something that's not physical?
Right.
And how do
Exactly.
you actually assess that they
Mhm.
need X amount of time
Right.
to be as productive and efficient and effective without somebody saying, "Well, why can't, it take, like, this much time?" It's like, "Well, are you
Sure.
the professional or not?"
Right.
Who's the
Right.
professional?
And also understanding that because everybody's journey is unique to them, right? That there's no necessarily like standard easy way of saying, "Oh, this is only going to take 2 weeks," and
Yeah.
then we'll be good to go. That's not fair either. So and I know that from an administrative perspective,
Yeah, they
that
wanna know
becomes frustrating, but again, that's where I step in as an advocate to be able to say, no, 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 no. We need to listen to what needs to be, customized to that person based on what they're showing and how they're reacting to, whatever treatment planning is there and outlined for them.
that's kind of the rub because, like, everybody wants to feel like everybody's the same, right? Everybody wants to say
Mhm.
that. But then when
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
individuals are so different that
Mhm.
I've talked to a lot on this podcast, we've had over 1,000 episodes. I talked to a lot of therapists, and
Mhm.
they're always saying that you can't have a cookie cutter
You
approach
can't. Yeah.
because everybody's different. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if you've got administrators or bean counters that want things to be done in
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
certain, like, narrow lane, because that's what they
Right.
expect, individuals kinda like, they're not all the same. Maybe we wanna say everybody's the same, but how you deal with individual trauma
Right.
is
Mhm.
different based on whatever that trauma source and what the history is and everybody's situation, though you maybe find patterns, right?
Right.
You can
Yeah.
find things that might be similar.
Mhm.
It's all gonna be kinda customized,
Right.
right?
Well, and one of the biggest variables, right, is perception because how I perceive pain versus how you perceive pain or how I perceive joy versus how you perceive joy is going to be different. There might be similarities like you said, but there will be variances based on our backgrounds and histories and how we have structured ourselves to interpret our surroundings, right? So that perception and interpretation certainly needs to be taken into consideration.
In your field, like, listening skills is, like, super important,
Mhm,
I believe, like, your understanding, like you just said, like, how somebody understands, like, a feeling or a word or a term, like,
mhm.
is their own kinda unique experience that they've had since they were born, right?
Yeah.
How they perceive and how what they know fear to be could be different
Mhm,
than what some other person thinks fear is versus what somebody thinks love is based on
mhm.
how they felt or what's happened to them. So
Yeah.
you have a common understanding of a term,
Mhm,
but it
mhm,
really is that person has their own understanding of it. And if there's a kind of disconnect and you just assume
mhm.
that X is X and Y is Y, it might not be,
It's
right?
not, yeah, and I guarantee when you make those types of assumptions, then reaching your person that you're working with is going to be harder. It's going to be more challenging, and the outcomes are likely not going to last a very long time if they come out positively at all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's like super. I mean, that's a critical point there. A lot maybe some people don't understand.
Mhm.
It's like a lot of times the communication just in the lay world, is like people kind of didn't, there's disconnects in
Yeah.
families between the
Mhm.
husband and wife and sister and
Sure.
brother. They don't hear each other in the
Right.
same family. So what
Right.
happens when you're with a stranger, right?
Right. Right.
If there's like microcosm level disconnect and there's macrocosm level disconnect
Mhm. Mhm.
because like you don't really listen.
Right. Oh, listening skills are imperative. And also, I think here's the other thing is that being able to be vulnerable, and I'm saying vulnerable, I almost want to put, quotes around that, and I'll explain why in a second, is so important because if you're not vulnerable, if you're not authentic, right? If you're not honest, then the person who is meant to be able to help you and walk alongside you, right, on your journey, whoever that might be, whether it's a coach or a therapist or a family member or all of the above, they're not going to be able to do that if there isn't any genuine, authentic, like reflection of
Mhm.
what you're feeling and what you're going through. So, and that I say vulnerability in quotes because vulnerability, it has a negative connotation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want, and again, this is where I become the advocate where I'm just like, "Oh my goodness, you're entitled to your feelings. Everyone is entitled to their feelings. Everyone is um, you know, needing to express those feelings without fearing being judged for them, right? Needing to be able to say, I can share what I'm feeling, mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever, and know that this is a safe space to be able to do that. And that the creation of a safe space, whether it's a work environment, whether it's a home environment, whether it's a therapeutic environment, is imperative, right? So that's why in coaching and in therapy, we talk so much about being able to create that initial rapport, which, part of that involves creating a safe space
Safe
to be able
space.
to
Yeah.
talk. Yeah. And I advocate, sorry, one more point, but like I really advocate also for workplaces. I mean, think about it. Aside from the time that we're spending with our families, our workplace is essentially, where we're spending so much time. So having the work environment encourage a sense of rigorous honesty and just honesty, authenticity, genuineness, I think I know facilitates better productivity, right?
Oh yeah. I
So,
mean,
yeah.
a lot of times, like what I've been, checking out, like your bio and the description of the people
Mhm,
you serve,
mhm,
and talking about like rural communities and
yeah,
underserved communities in the military. I can
mhm,
kind of see a parallel where there might be a lot of shame in all
mhm,
those areas about
mhm.
being vulnerable
Yeah,
because of because like
100%.
maybe you've been taught that vulnerability
Mhm.
makes you weak, right?
Makes you
So
weak. Yeah,
so you're not willing to be vulnerable. So you put on a show, you put on an
yeah,
act, you put on a mask, and you never really deal with like the looking glass self because I'm into Victorian poets, but the idea that you
uh,
being a creative person myself, an artist, like a
yeah,
poet, writer, musician, everything we do in terms of being a songwriter is about that vulnerability. It's about that
mhm,
authenticity to be able to
mhm,
pull something that might be hurt, might that might
mhm,
be
mhm,
painful, and turn it
mhm.
into a piece of art. It's
For
kind of like
sure.
what we do as artists. But a
Yes.
lot of times, if you're not in that kind of creative world, you're
Mhm.
told that that's something you shouldn't do. That's
Oh,
something you should
yeah,
hide, and you
right.
should have shame about that. That you should just be suck it up and not even go there.
Right. I mean, think about this too, like, there are so many cultures that, have restrictions around the expression through art as well. Like, even though art is a significant part, I would say arguably, of so many cultures, of all cultures, arguably, but there are also
Yeah,
instances that we
restrictions on
can
how
pick
far you can
out,
go.
where, yeah, where it's held back, it's not encouraged, where there's a limit for it. This is only what you do until this age, um, gender inequality for the same, those kinds of things. Like, so many different layers that get added to expression, right? And yes, I resonate with that. I mean, I was born and brought up in a household that was heavily artistically bound. So art and music and, dance have always been a very dominant part of my life, and one that has anchored me, in so many ways. But if it's not encouraged, if you're coming from a situation or a culture, or even being introduced to a culture where that is uh, not supposed to
Yeah.
happen, right? Dismissed or shunned, you know, then, oh my goodness, like, the disconnect that ends up happening. And of course, the confusion with, like, wait a second, now how am I going to express myself? What am I going to do?
Yeah, it just bottles up, and then anything that gets
Mhm.
bottled up,
Mhm.
it can be explode or,
Yeah.
gets to a critical mass,
Yeah.
and because you're not taught how to deal
Yeah.
with your triggers, you're not taught
Mhm.
to understand it, you're not taught to dive into it, you're taught to, like, paper over it,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then eventually, you don't have any more safe space,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
So if you run out of safe space, what happens?
Right, right, and then the arguably also, like, when you're artistically bound, right? That's something that you use to connect not only with others, but also for sure for yourself, like we said, the expression of oneself through these other means. So now you're losing the ability to connect with yourself. That's going to be really bad. That's not good. So you can't connect with yourself, and you're having difficulty with connecting with others. The expression of yourself is stigmatized in multiple ways, and that's what definitely causes some problems across
That's
different
where, like,
cultures.
the source of, like, dysfunction and addiction and
Mhm.
all the problem. Because if you have nowhere to put it,
Mhm.
where does it go? It goes
Mhm.
into like, behavioral
Sure.
issues, it goes into addiction, it goes into potentially violence, it goes into a lot of areas that are, like, if you don't have anywhere to express, like, frustration or feelings
Right.
or even try to dive into
Yep.
because
The
it's not.
acknowledge
Yeah, because 'cause you're not supposed to do it.
Right.
'Cause it's like
Right.
it's wrong. It's like you could have a spiritual structure in your community that says you
Mhm.
cannot express this,
Exactly.
'cause that's taboo.
Yeah.
And so if you hit the taboo, then what are you supposed to do with that?
Right. Oh, well, and I have personal experience with that for sure. I mean, I have a history, where I went through trauma myself, and it was in a past relationship where entering into that committed relationship, I was told from a cultural perspective, like, no, women, as a woman, you need to, follow through with gender assigned roles, and the expression of yourself in any artistic way is shameful. You shouldn't do it. And this is me coming from a home, as a minority female, where my family and my parents encouraged that all the way around. So it was quite a disconnect, and definitely part of the trauma experience that I had, that I had to, of course, push through, and I was able to push through. So, yeah.
And there's like a lot of times, like you deal with different parts of society, like LGBTQ.
Mhm.
You could have like kind of spiritual domination of a structure that's
Mhm.
saying that part, that's who you are. Like you realize that's
Mhm.
who you are if that's the kind of
Mhm.
how you end up. Because that's
Mhm.
and then people say, well, you can't be that. And then
Mhm.
you're just like ostracized, or you're put
Yeah.
into a zone that like of oh, you can't talk to this person, you got to get rid of kick them out of the family.
Mhm.
Those things can be really fundamental when you deal with somebody that's been kind of booted out of their family, their
Yeah.
society, their neighborhood,
What they
their
know.
what they
Yeah.
know is like that's a lot of man. Do you have to work with the people around them, or you just deal with the individual?
Both. I've had situations of both for sure where there's been the disconnect, from in those familial systems, and the goal at that point is making sure first and foremost that the individual is safe and secure and has a sense of a platform minimally to be able to even be in a situation where the discussion with other family members or society members is happening. So safety is first and foremost. And then when talking with the family or the society or the community or immediate circle, what becomes important is being able to establish a place, a safe space where the ideas, feelings, wants, needs are expressed without judgment and heard, you know? Um, that's a first goal, and understanding each other's languages, right? Especially for these different diverse communities. Um, there are languages that are used, lexicon that's used to be able to express one's sense of self and identity, and also what that might mean within the community that they're in.
Mm.
So it's important to start to understand and learn that lexicon. So part of the journey in a familial system or in a community based system is making sure that that language is learned and understood.
It seems like that's a lot of work, to are people going to be able to get out of their uncomfort zone?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there are definitely, challenges, and I think for some who are not aware or maybe might not be open to, learning, certainly poses a challenge, when that type of instruction or sharing occurs. Um, but it all becomes and I kind of land on this question is what are you willing to commit to, right? You,
Mhm.
the family member, what are you willing to commit to understand the other person, to understand the rest of your family and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
What's our meeting ground here,
Yeah,
right?
because sometimes, like, in the law of attraction I've always got into is
Mhm.
sometimes the people around you evolve if they can't evolve with you, right?
Sure.
Like, so you
Yeah.
end up going to, like, the new family that
Mhm.
accepts you,
Mhm.
If now
Mhm.
the family refuses to, after being very open and being, as transparent as possible, you
Mhm.
you try to work it out and then they don't, you go where it does work.
Right. Right. Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that definitely people will seek out that sense of community in some way, shape, or form. And one thing that again I'm another advocate of is finding that sense of healthy community that supports you in a positive way and in a healing based way to encourage that healing journey is really, really important because what do we know about all of the major conditions, whether it's depression, anxiety, addiction, these are conditions of isolation. The more you get into it, the more you have the tendency to isolate, the worse it's going to be. So, finding that sense of community is very important. Finding support groups can be very helpful, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, because the idea I was I was a sociology major and we studied anomie
Mm,
and the kind
mhm.
of disconnect and the kind of ostracization that people
Hospitalization,
get
yeah. Mhm.
because of, not following the norms.
Yep.
So you get put into that state of anomie where you're just disconnected,
Right.
and there's all different levels of it. You may do, because of politics, because of
Yeah.
like, creativity, because of your sex, because of your rate, all kinds of different things can put you in
Right.
in that place.
Right.
And so it
Right.
depends on what the source is, but it could be all of them at once.
Mhm. Mhm.
but but but
Exactly.
but it's just it seems could be insurmountable if you try to take it all at once. But
No,
like a
yeah,
lot of times you have to kind of take bite-sized
for sure.
pieces to,
Yes.
if
Yes.
you get overwhelmed, is there a strategy when you're dealing with people, somebody's like overwhelmed with
Sure.
all these
Oh,
things, and you get them to kind of
mhm.
break
Yeah.
it down and try to figure out what can you handle after you've been kind of overloaded.
For sure. So, I mean, one of the things that I love to do with people is taking them from understanding and identifying what those long-term goals are. Like, what's the master list? What's on the long-term goal list? And then prioritizing them. And then in that prioritization, we focus on, the stuff that's the lowest hanging fruit that we can tackle most immediately and then create a system where we're saying, okay, this is what we're doing first, this is what we're doing second, this is what we're doing third. And just because, something might be a little bit further down the line doesn't mean we're not going to get to it. It just means that we're taking steps to get there and you will get there, right?
Mhm.
The other tool that I really like, and that's just the surface level approach to it, there's a lot more that goes into that. But the other thing that's really important is giving yourself the time and the space to do what I like to call the AAA method. And this is pretty much applicable across the board, and that's acknowledge, and action plan. And the first acknowledge is to acknowledge what it is that you're feeling right now in this present moment and understanding where there's discomfort and where you feel good, where there are wins, right? Because what we want to do with that identification is understanding, okay, if these are wins and this is what's making us feel good, then let's definitely do more of that as long as it's safe and healthy and good. And
Mhm.
then the stuff that's not making us feel good, that we're feeling uncomfortable about with those goals and aspirations, let's identify the whys to those, right? So then that takes us to the next A, which is another acknowledgement. And that's the acknowledgement of what you actually want to have happen, right? So that's where you say, okay, I know this is what I want. This is what that would look like. Take the time to visualize in that space. Acknowledge what it is that you want. Feel what it is that you want. Um, you know, how will it feel when you have it? Right. And then that takes you to the last A in the triple A, which is action planning. Right. So, action planning again kind of feeds right into that whole set of long term, short term goals, right? Where you can say, okay, this is what I can do most immediately right now. And sometimes that most immediate part of the action plan is I'm just going to get up from my desk and move. you know, I'm going to go and get some fresh air. I'm going to give myself the time to breathe. And then the next step after that is going to be like, well, I'm going to write down what I want to do for the rest of the week, or maybe even for the rest of the day and then the week. But in essence, you're action planning, and you're action planning towards what it is that you actually want. So the AAA method works beautifully. And, the biggest thing with that comes along with that is that, again, what are you willing to commit to, right? Are you willing to commit to what you set up for yourself in that AAA method?
Now, if you have people who have a hard time with like commitment,
Mhm.
because a lot of times, like I was always told my grandpa says, like half of the getting something done is just showing up and
Mhm.
being willing to show up.
Yeah.
If you show up and you're willing to put in the hard days work
Sure.
and you get benefits, but you get some people that they start to procrastinate or they're
Oh,
not
yeah.
able to complete because they
Yeah.
got stuck in a cycle where they never really complete. And
Mhm.
even if they give them like a 5-step plan, 10-step plan, 12-step plan,
Yeah.
they only get to step 3 and stop. And
Yeah.
that's what
So
they always tend to
yeah,
do. So how do you
perpetuates the cycle. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
how do
So
you get
this
out of
is
that?
what Sure, sure, yeah. So this is what I suggest. Instead of even thinking about 3 steps, just think about 1. That's it, right? Once you hit that 1, then it's, "Okay, what's 2?" Right? And make sure there's consistency so that the time frame might be a little bit longer, but you can definitely do it, and it's definitely possible. There are tools and techniques that I give to the people that I work with, where if you haven't completed that first step yet, you're not allowed to proceed to the next one. And that in and of itself, that mindset's like, oh, wait a second, but I want to get to the next one. So
Mhm.
through a lot of positive reinforcement and encouragement and also accountability, that helps with reinforcing that sense of commitment in a situation where commitment might have been the hurdle.
Yeah, because that's always kind of the rub with some folks that just or they're looking maybe for the like magic bullet. They're looking for the magic
Mhm.
pill.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a lot of times it's like, I'm a diabetic. So I'm a diabetic 24/7. And in order to maintain it, I have to do certain things. If I don't
Mhm.
do those things, the numbers go crazy.
Right.
So
Right.
that in order to stay in the right, you know, in
Right.
moderation, I like what can't drink, probably
Sure.
shouldn't smoke. If I need to exercise, if I don't, my numbers go off.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
nowadays we have like wearables. So now
Mhm.
I can see what my number is all the time. I don't have to say, well, I don't know what my number is.
Sure.
Where that was like old excuses, like I don't know, so I can do it.
Right.
Now I actually just go into my watch every
Yeah.
5 seconds and I know
Yeah.
what it is. So
Mhm.
then I
Mhm.
actually can maintain
Mhm.
kind of a modern tool, but that's just a
Right.
tool. But like,
Mhm.
how can you get kind of that kind of tool, that wearable in your head? How do
Right.
you get
Well,
that into your head?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, now you've got the data. So what are you going to do with the data? Right? That becomes the question. And again, that's where it's like, okay, even if it's one thing that you can do in a day, what's that one thing going to be? Even if that one thing is 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, right? Something, right? That is a win. And that's good.
Mhm.
And that's a step. And that's all we need to be able to launch you from your platform.
So it sounds like you gotta focus on the wins rather than focusing on the losses. Because I think there's some like, as a creative person, a lot of people look at like, "Oh, I wanna make something perfect." But
Sure. Oh,
I'm a big believer in a
perfection.
happy accident.
Right,
Kinda
right.
like there's no bad note, there's an
Oh, yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, I
So
mean, there's so many saying yeah, there's so many sayings, like fail fast and move forward, things like that. Like, why are we even using that negative terminology? Like, is it really a failure? Is failure failure? You know what I mean? Like, we have the opportunity to learn from everything, right? Whether it's positive or negative. And so what you do with it, even if you want to say something was a failure, it didn't work, right? Okay, don't perseverate in it, right? Try to push yourself from saying, I get it. And there's that AAA method where you say, I acknowledge this. I acknowledge that I feel uncomfortable with the fact that this didn't work. I acknowledge that I'm frustrated with this situation because we weren't able to meet minds, whatever the situation is. And then you say, great, what do I actually want to have happen? And there's that second acknowledgement piece where you're saying, this is what I'm wanting, this is what I aspire for. And then you action plan, and there's that third play towards that aspiration, right? So yeah, I mean, everything is a learning moment, whether good or bad. And, I think it's important to be able to give oneself that space to be able to work through it, right? So, time and patience and breathing through those thought processes so that you can not only be honest with yourself and authentic, but give yourself the time and the mental space to be able to go through AAA,
Yeah.
and feel secure with the fact that you're giving yourself those action plans is what will reinforce your sense of confidence.
Well, we talked about like shame and how that might be affecting like the
Mhm,
underserved communities, but also in terms of access,
mhm.
right? Is if you're in a rural area or an underserved community, maybe, how do you help with the access issue
Oh, yeah.
in terms of people trying to, dive into like solutions, but then they don't even know the first thing about how do I even ask for help in
Sure.
those
Oh, yeah.
areas.
Even if you're not saying the words coming out of your mouth, like, "I need help," you know, the fact that you're showing up, whether it's virtually or in person, is, in my mind, you saying, "I'm here for a reason," right? So there's something that is needed, that there's something that might be wanting. So we'll explore that. So just showing up, right, is the first step, is asking the question without even uttering words. And that will
Mhm.
help for sure for me, with getting us started. Um, but yeah, I would say, when feeling like you don't have the room or the space or know even how to ask, just try to take one step in the direction of the help that you're wanting, and that step will take you to the next step and to the next and to the next if you allow for it.
Do you run into people that feel like if they ask for help, they're going to get penalized?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
if some people have programs at work,
Yeah,
but right, they're scared if they actually take the program, then HR is going to put a mark against
100%.
them, right? And then so they're
Absolutely.
not ever going to use it because well, they're going to use that against me, and I'll be in the next layoff.
Unfortunately, that's across all cultures, right? I've seen it in the military population. I've seen that in, minority populations. I've seen that, in corporate culture, right? Um, and that's where, again, the environment isn't promoting a sense of being able to be genuine and authentic and vulnerable, as we said, which then hurts the person and then in turn will hurt the company or hurt the group that this is ultimately happening in. So, yes, I've seen that type of stigma really influence negatively not only the individual but the culture or the group of people that individual is part of. Um, and how to break through that, again, I mean, I think it takes advocates. I think it takes constant reminders. I have no problem with being the person who's repeating
Mhm.
the reminder of, it's okay to get help. I'm here to walk you through it. We're here to walk you through it. There are support systems available to you, and to understand that you are not alone, that there are many people who feel fearful and may not have the words or the strength to know how to ask for help. You're not alone, but take the step, take a step, even if it's just getting off the couch or picking up the phone and dialing the number. Take the step.
Yeah, because it could be like maybe you don't go through the HR, but you talk to
Mhm,
somebody like yourself, or you
mhm.
deal with like the online community now that now you don't have to actually physically go to
Right.
an office. Now
Yeah,
you can deal with people because of the net, because of the internet, because of your
exactly.
phone,
Yep,
that you can actually still get to the help. And
exactly.
maybe the other on the other side is like getting HR and these corporations to destigmatize that and
100%.
actually not just have a corporate policy, but actually have a conversation with the employees
Yes, yes.
to
Yeah.
actually make them feel
Mhm.
that it's not just a piece of paper, that you actually really believe it and you
Right,
are saying there's not gonna be any retribution, there's not gonna be any bad
right.
consequence. that you
exactly.
make them understand that that is the company policy.
Right, and that the company policy, encourages your own health and healing, which will then enable you to be part of, the productivity in the
Well,
company
yeah, it's good
culture,
for the
like
company because it's gonna increase profitability and increase,
yeah.
just, I think, what is it, efficiency. Like,
Mhm.
if you're not feeling well, well, not
Right.
just because you got a broken arm
Mhm.
or you got a physical ailment that you can
Mhm.
measure, then when you're gonna
Mhm.
come back to work.
Yep.
But if you're not there, like, in your spirit, in your
No.
heart,
Yeah.
then you're not gonna be as efficient, right?
Exactly.
You're not gonna be as effective, you're not gonna be as productive. So
Yeah.
your productivity probably, if you ran the metrics for the people running the bean counters,
Mhm.
if you're more evolved
Yeah.
in your HR policy toward mental health,
Mhm.
over time, maybe you'd see an increase in productivity, you could prove it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's so many tools nowadays too, not to mention like especially there are companies who still may not be able to, offer insurance and things like that as benefits, but there are other perks and inclusions that can be helpful like, promoting a connection to an app that might be a calming and restful app or something that
Mhm.
reinforces mindfulness. I said calm, the Calm app is great. But things like that, Headspace also, that's another great one. But there are different things providing mental health first aid, maybe even, looking at a group of people who might be interested in being able to get trained in mental health first aid and, be part of that, making that part of the company language and lexicon to promote that nonviolent communication is also a good way of doing it. Having great company retreats where you're coming together, and the retreat isn't just about like checking the boxes, but it's also about saying, you know what, we recognize you all and we want you to know that we value you and reinforcing that sense of value. These are all different ways of being
Yeah.
able to reinforce
Well, making
that
people
culture.
feel
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
community. Like, if you're in a
Yeah.
company and it feels like you're valued because they
Mhm.
listen to what you
Yeah.
have to say,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
actually, provide reasonable accommodation. Like, if
Mhm.
you are somebody
Yeah.
from that community, you
Yeah.
need a reasonable accommodation and they're willing to
Mhm.
entertain it, right? They're
Yeah.
actually willing to do it, then you feel like, "Okay, I'm being validated,
Yes.
and I'm not just a
100%.
widget. I'm not
Right.
just a,
Cog in the
automaton."
wheel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I can just get somebody else to do your job tomorrow." Like,
Sure.
if you feel your boss thinks that that's the way they think about you,
Right.
then you're probably not gonna wanna
Yeah,
deeply
when you wanna
participate.
be there. Right, right. No, I think it's so important to make sure, that the people that you work with, no matter what level you are, if it's a hierarchical system, that you are reinforced, that that validation and respect is given across the board, both top down, bottom up, or middle out, like so being able to communicate that and share positives is such an important part of establishing that healthy work culture as well. I've been through workplaces where it's like, oh well, performance review time, and we're not going to be able to give you the positive scores and, the highest scores because that means that, you have nothing to strive for. That's not really the way you're going to encourage somebody to perform better because what are you doing in that situation? You're basically saying, well, you can't ever get the 5. So then that person will likely be like, well, why should I work harder if I can
You're
never get
never
the
gonna get the
5?
fight. Yeah,
You
I mean,
know?
it's just kinda counterintuitive, but again, the bean counters do that to kinda lower
Mhm.
their costs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so they don't think about the effect on the human being, they think of
Mhm.
it from a bean counter perspective rather than the motivational perspectives. If you incrementally you show that this person is actually growing, then
Yeah.
they're gonna wanna grow. They wanna get
Yeah.
certifications. They wanna go and take new tasks. But
100%.
when you don't, if you just wanna red mark them all day,
Mhm.
then they're not
Mhm.
gonna wanna be there.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
But, it's just a different mindset, like, it depends on, where's your mindset for the
Mhm.
modern workforce? Are you still running with a kinda top-down approach or
Yeah.
realizing that the
Yeah.
workers add the value because they
Oh,
actually know
Yeah.
your product probably better than you.
Yeah. One of my, subspecialties is business psychology. And one of the things that we know and has been proven is that if you lean in on a hierarchical system that is punitive and that doesn't allow individuals who are arguably at the bottom of that hierarchy to have a voice and feel validated, then your productivity and work culture is not going to be ranked as high. It's not going to work well for you. So again, like being in a structure where there's equity and the conversations are encouraged, the inclusions are understood and encouraged, and discussed will help with promoting that more equitable work environment.
Yeah, I mean, if you have somebody on the front line,
Mhm.
right, in an assembly plant, and they actually tell the engineer, this would actually work better if you did it this way, because I actually work on this. But you
Yeah.
just say, no, the engineer knows better than you.
Right, right,
Then you never get any of that feedback from the floor. And the
right.
feedback from the floor is important.
Mhm.
But like if you
100%.
totally make no incentive for that at all, then they'll
Mhm.
go to the next plant just for the higher pay.
Exactly.
And they'll never
Exactly.
give you any of the innovation that you need, that
Mhm.
feedback from the people who do the job,
Sure.
right?
Exactly.
And it
Yeah.
shouldn't just come from the actuaries and
Mhm.
come from shareholders. It
Mhm.
should come
Mhm.
from the floor too.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
as a motivational speaker,
Mhm.
what has that influenced the way you actually work as a therapist advocate?
I think it's all related.
Mm,
I think so much of the work that I've done with individuals one-on-one involves elements of motivation, so much so that when I speak to different populations, a lot of that comes out, so it to me it's kind of hand in hand.
mhm.
Um one has influenced the other, has influenced the other, and it's just an ongoing
Yeah,
cycle. The
interconnected.
the beauty being I 100%, like, throughout all of my career have seen this, that there are trends in emotions, so, of course, we know this, like, we're coming up on a season in the fall here with election season coming up where tensions are gonna be very heightened. That's a really blatant example, of how so much just kind of ramps up and so many people will be feeling that stress. But even when there isn't something huge like that going on, I've always seen across my list of people that I work with that there are typically similar themes going on. And so, interestingly enough, when I do the motivational speaking, right, like it falls into that kind of like thematic outline, right, where where you're being invited to talk about whatever, like depression or anxiety or being able to overcome challenges or anything. Like there's a reason why that's happening. There's usually something going
Yeah,
on societally that is
you can
pushing.
connect it. But
Yeah.
it's good if you can tell a story. I mean, the whole thing
Mhm.
about connecting is like if you can
Mhm.
tell a story,
Yeah.
then you can connect. It's kinda like that elevator pitch.
Mhm,
Like, if
mhm.
people's attention spans are so kinda limited. If
Right.
you can connect with that elevator pitch level thing,
Yes,
that
yes.
shows that you actually, can relay
Reach.
reach that person, and the
Mhm.
person understands what you're saying.
Right,
And then you can actually listen,
right.
are you able to hear that
Sure,
and
sure.
process that the
Right.
way the person intended it?
Yep, exactly, yeah. And being able to be human with each other, right? Like, I think there's I always like to say, like, when I do speaking engagements, I'm not always the person who likes to be sitting up on a stage or standing up on a stage. I wanna be with my people, so
Mhm.
being amongst them and being able to sit even in just a comfortable position, cross-legged on the floor, even where we're actually just having the time to talk and you see me as a human and I see you as a human. Like
Yeah,
that's going to help with being able to get you wherever you need to go. It's certainly
Yeah,
part of that. So I
that's
really enjoy, being able to connect with individuals at that level. It's not about
more
me
relatable.
here. Yeah, I'm accessible and I'm here to be able to make your access to care easier and let you know that there is hope. You're not alone. Everybody is recovering from something. And, I can walk alongside you on your journey if you need me to. And I know for sure that we can get you to a point where you can walk that journey with confidence as well.
I think that's really important to kind of be amongst the crowd. A
Mhm.
lot of politicians could probably learn from that instead of
Mhm.
being on the podium. Like
Mhm.
walk
Yeah.
walk the neighborhood,
Yeah.
go into the
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
asking people what they really want
What
instead of
they
kind of
want.
saying, "This is
Mhm.
what we're giving you,
Sure.
and you should
Yeah.
like us." Like,
Mhm.
go and listen to what the people want
Mhm.
by
Mhm.
walking the street and asking
Sure.
them,
Sure.
which is like
Yeah.
a lot of grassroots type people that when you kinda gotta do
Right.
grassroots,
Mhm.
then people feel like you're listening. You
Mhm. Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
you have a better than the top-down approach where it's like, you got all the pretty lights and you got the presentation,
Right.
it's all the fluff. It's like, that's cool,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
not is that really reaching? Because people are like, "Ah, that's just what I seen yesterday. I saw
Sure.
that the week before." It's like,
Yep.
I want somebody that's like, "Oh, this person actually talked to me
Mhm.
on the street level
Right.
and
Right.
got what I was saying." And
Right.
like, "Oh, that you didn't get more connection there."
Exactly. There's that rapport, there's that validation, like when a person feels validated, there's a lot that can happen, in terms of work and building that connection and giving them the feeling that they have that space to be able to build off of. Yeah.
Yeah, like the
Mm.
CEO walks into the
Mhm.
cube where all
Mhm.
the cubes are and actually, "Let's see what people on the floor are doing."
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually talk to you, like, "Oh, you actually came in and talked to us." It's like, "Oh my
Right.
god, that's a revelation. He actually talked
Oh,
to us."
yeah. I can't tell you how many times we were in situations like corporate, military, you name it. There have been situations where, the higher up or the full birds are coming down and it's always like a fear factor because and you've been conditioned where they're only coming down if something's wrong, right?
Something's wrong, that's the only
Right.
reason you gotta come the only if it comes to something's wrong.
Right.
You
So
gotta change
versus
that.
versus the leader or the commander who's coming down and being part of your group and just saying, "Hey, no, I wanted to say hi and check in with you," changes that entire
Changes
environment.
the
So
whole
you're not,
dynamic.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's not a
you're not
fear
like living
dynamic.
in fear. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the fear
Mhm.
dynamic is like, "Oh, he's
Yeah.
coming. I
Yeah.
better, like, button it up. I better make sure everything's, like, clean."
Clean and good and
Pretty good, and it
yeah.
just creates more stress. That's more
Right.
stressful. That's not gonna, like, alleviate stress. It's
Right.
gonna compound stress. But,
Yeah.
I think we've had a really great conversation. I didn't mention,
Yes.
like, on your, drmala.net, like, if people click on that,
Mhm.
what happens? How are they able to connect with you there?
Sure. Yeah. So on socials, my handle is at the official Dr. Mala. So you can find me there too. I'm on LinkedIn. drmala.net will give you all of my contact information as well. So more than happy to get outreach through that as well.
That's awesome. So people can actually book with you or can find a way to talk to you that way?
Find information. Yeah. And I have a team of professionals that also provide services. So there's definitely accessibility there, and we're here to work with a lot of different people across different walks of life. Yeah.
I think this has been very productive, and I think my audience has appreciated your approach and finding out about like how you integrate this kind of holistic concept into
Mm.
things is I think a better
Thank
process.
you. Thank you. It's been a wonderful time talking to you. I've really enjoyed myself, and thank you for having me.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.